Lieutenant Sarah Chun adjusted her flight helmet as she walked across the tarmac toward the F-16 Fighting Falcon. The morning sun cast long shadows between the aircraft, but the warmth did nothing to ease the chill she felt from her squadron mates nearby. Their laughter carried on the desert wind, sharp and cutting. "Hey Chun, try not to scratch the paint this time," called out Captain Rodriguez from beside his own aircraft. The other pilots chuckled, their voices echoing off the hangar walls behind them. Sarah kept walking, her boots steady against the concrete. She had heard it all before. The jokes about her compact frame barely meeting the height requirements. The whispered comments about diversity quotas. The assumptions that her promotion came from anywhere but skill. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have military families in your area who understand what it means to prove yourself every single day. She reached her aircraft and began her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision. Every rivet, every surface, every control checked twice. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory guiding her through procedures she could perform blindfolded. The other pilots were already climbing into their cockpits, eager to get airborne, but Sarah never rushed this ritual. The squadron briefing room buzzed with conversation as pilots filed in for the morning mission overview. Sarah took her usual seat in the back row, notebook ready, while the others clustered near the front. Major Williams entered and the chatter died down. Today's exercise involves formation flying and tactical maneuvers over the Nevada range, Williams announced, pointing to the map displayed on the screen. "Rodriguez, you'll lead Alpha formation. Thompson, take Bravo." Sarah waited for her assignment, pen poised over her notepad. The silence stretched longer than usual. "Chun, you'll be flying solo reconnaissance," Williams finally said. "Stay clear of the main formations and practice your basic maneuvers." "Solo recon." Again, Sarah nodded without expression, but inside she felt the familiar sting of being sidelined. Around her, the other pilots exchanged knowing glances. "Don't worry, Chun," Rodriguez said with mock concern. "Maybe next month you can join the real pilots." The laughter was quieter this time, but Sarah heard every snicker. She continued taking notes as Williams outlined the mission parameters, weather conditions, and safety protocols. Her handwriting remained steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. After dismissal, she walked to the flight line alone while the others moved in groups, their voices animated with anticipation. The desert heat shimmered off the runway, distorting the horizon into wavering lines. Sarah climbed into her cockpit and began the startup sequence. The familiar hum of instruments coming online filled the cramped space as she ran through her checklist. Engine temperature, oil pressure, fuel levels, all systems green. Through her canopy, she watched the other pilots taxi toward the runway in perfect formation. "Tower, this is Viper 1 requesting clearance for formation takeoff." Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio. "Viper 1, you're cleared for takeoff runway 27, Tower control responded. The four F-16s roared down the runway together, their afterburners painting streaks of blue flame against the desert sky. Sarah waited for her own clearance, watching them climb in tight formation before banking west toward the training area. "Tower, this is Viper 5 requesting clearance for solo departure," she transmitted. "Viper 5, hold your position," came the reply. "Priority traffic inbound." Sarah sat in her cockpit for another 15 minutes, watching civilian aircraft land while her squadron disappeared over the horizon. The delay wasn't unusual for solo flights, but it meant she would be even further behind the main group. When clearance finally came, she taxied to the runway and pushed the throttles forward. The afterburner kicked in with a thunderous roar, pressing her back into her seat as the fighter accelerated down the center line. At rotation speed, she pulled back gently on the stick and felt the familiar sensation of leaving Earth behind. At 20,000 feet, Sarah leveled off and scanned the horizon for her squadron. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly below, a tapestry of brown and tan broken by occasional roads and mining operations. Her radar showed 4 contacts 15 miles northwest, executing what appeared to be combat spread formations. She adjusted her heading to maintain the required separation distance, close enough to observe, but far enough to avoid interfering with their exercise. Through her headset, she could hear their radio chatter as they practiced intercept maneuvers and defensive tactics. Viper 2, you're drifting outside parameters, Rodriguez called out. Copy lead, adjusting course, Thompson replied, his voice tight with concentration. Sarah smiled despite herself. Thompson always struggled with precise formation flying, especially during high-G maneuvers. She had noticed it during previous exercises, the way his aircraft would lag slightly behind optimal positioning during turns. Her own aircraft responded like an extension of her body as she executed a series of practice maneuvers. Barrel rolls, splits turns, high-G climbs that would test the limits of human endurance. Each movement was fluid, controlled, with the kind of precision that came from thousands of hours in simulators and countless study sessions reviewing aerodynamic principles. Below, a dust devil spiraled across the desert floor, its miniature tornado visible even from this altitude. Sarah banked slightly to get a better view, her movements so subtle that the aircraft barely registered the course correction. The radio crackled with increasing tension as Sarah monitored her squadron's exercise. What had started as routine formation practice was quickly escalating into something more challenging. She could hear the strain in their voices as they attempted advanced tactical maneuvers. Viper 3, close it up, you're falling behind, Rodriguez commanded. I'm at max performance here, lead, came the breathless reply from Lieutenant Parker. Sarah watched through her targeting system as the formation began to spread apart during a high-speed climbing turn. The forces were taking their toll, and maintaining precise positioning became nearly impossible at those stress levels. She had studied these exact scenarios in advanced flight school, memorizing the physics and practicing the techniques until they became second nature. Her own aircraft handled the observational maneuvers effortlessly. While staying well clear of their airspace, she demonstrated textbook precision in every turn and climb. The difference was stark, though only she was positioned to notice it. Tower, this is Viper lead, Rodriguez called out. We need to modify the exercise parameters. Aircraft performance is reaching limitations. The admission hung in the air like an unspoken failure. Sarah knew these maneuvers were well within the capabilities of their aircraft. The limitation wasn't mechanical, it was human. Years of additional training and study had prepared her for exactly these conditions, but that preparation went unrecognized, unacknowledged, and unutilized by those who needed it most. The exercise continued to deteriorate as Sarah watched from her distant position. What should have been a showcase of squadron coordination had become a struggle against basic physics and human limitations. She listened to the increasingly frustrated radio communications as her fellow pilots fought to maintain formation integrity. Viper 4, you're way outside acceptable parameters, Rodriguez barked into his microphone. Sir, I'm pulling 4.5 GS here, Martinez replied, his voice strained against the crushing force. Can't hold position. Sarah shook her head slightly. 4.5 GS was barely intermediate level for these maneuvers. The proper technique involved body positioning, breathing control, and aircraft management that she had mastered years ago. But explaining that would require someone to ask her opinion, which had never happened. From her vantage point, she could see the fundamental errors they were making. Thompson was fighting his controls instead of working with them. Parker was overcorrecting every small deviation. Martinez was tensing up instead of staying relaxed against the forces. Her own aircraft remained steady as granite despite executing far more complex observational patterns. Every movement was calculated, efficient, wasting no energy on unnecessary corrections or dramatic maneuvers. The difference in skill was becoming impossible to ignore, yet she remained relegated to the sidelines, watching expertise go unrecognized while mediocrity struggled in the spotlight. The situation grew more critical as Sarah monitored the deteriorating exercise. Her squadron's formation had completely collapsed, with aircraft scattered across several miles of airspace as pilots struggled to regain control after a particularly demanding sequence of maneuvers. All Viper aircraft, this is Control Tower, a new voice cut through the radio chatter. We have an emergency situation developing. Civilian aircraft in distress. Coordinates to Savenzaro at 15 miles northwest of your current position. Sarah's head snapped toward the location. That put the emergency directly between her squadron and the base, right in the path they would need to take for their return approach. Her tactical display immediately began calculating intercept courses and timing. Viper lead. Can your formation respond to emergency support request? Tower control asked. Negative control, Rodriguez replied, breathing heavily. Formation is scattered, low on fuel. Pilots are experiencing fatigue from high-G maneuvers. Estimate 20 minutes to reform and respond. 20 minutes. Sarah knew that could be the difference between life and death for civilian aircraft in trouble. Her fuel levels were optimal, her position was ideal, and her aircraft was operating at peak performance. She was the closest responder by far, yet protocol kept her silent on the emergency frequency. The irony cut deep. While her squadron struggled with basic maneuvers, a real emergency was developing that demanded exactly the kind of precision flying she had spent years perfecting. Sarah's radar locked onto the civilian aircraft signal, a small twin-engine plane flying erratically at low altitude. The pilot's distress calls filled the emergency frequency with increasing desperation. Engine failure, hydraulic problems, and deteriorating weather conditions had created a perfect storm of aviation nightmares. Mayday, Mayday, this is Cessna 472, the civilian pilot transmitted. Lost primary engine, controls are sluggish, need immediate assistance for emergency landing. Sarah checked her position relative to the distressed aircraft. She was less than 5 minutes away at maximum speed, while her squadron remained scattered and struggling to regroup. Her fingers hovered over the radio transmit button, knowing that protocol demanded she wait for orders. Control tower, this is Viper 5, she finally transmitted, her voice calm and professional. I am in optimal position to provide immediate assistance to the emergency aircraft. Request permission to divert from current mission. There was a pause that seemed to stretch forever. In the background, she could hear Rodriguez still trying to coordinate his scattered formation, their voices tense with fatigue and frustration. Viper 5, control tower responded. What is your current fuel state and aircraft condition? Fuel at 70%, all systems green, aircraft performing at optimal parameters. Sarah replied immediately. Estimated time to intercept emergency aircraft is 4 minutes 30 seconds. Another pause. Then the words that would change everything. Viper 5, control tower finally responded. Checking your flight records and qualifications now. Stand by. Sarah's heart pounded as she maintained her heading toward the emergency coordinates. Below, the Nevada landscape blurred past at over 400 miles per hour. Every second counted now, and she could hear the civilian pilots' increasingly panicked transmissions as the situation deteriorated. The pause stretched longer than any combat maneuver she had ever flown. She knew the tower controllers were pulling up her file, reviewing her training records, her simulator scores, her flight evaluations. Everything she had worked for, every hour of study and practice, was being scrutinized in real time while a life hung in the balance. Control tower to all aircraft, this is Senior Controller Williams. A different voice came over the radio. I have reviewed pilot qualifications for emergency response. The following orders are effective immediately. Sarah's grip tightened on the flight controls. In the distance, she could see smoke trailing from the civilian aircraft as it struggled to maintain altitude. The pilot was running out of options and time. Viper 5, Williams continued. You are immediately reassigned to Emergency Response Command. All other Viper aircraft will follow your lead and instructions for this operation. The radio fell silent except for the background static. Rodriguez's voice was notably absent. For the first time in her military career, Lieutenant Sarah Chun was being given command authority over the very pilots who had spent months questioning her qualifications. Copy control tower, Viper 5 assuming emergency command. Sarah transmitted with unwavering confidence. All Viper aircraft, this is your new mission commander. Form up on my position immediately for coordinated rescue operation. The transformation was instantaneous. Gone was the hesitant pilot relegated to solo reconnaissance. In her place emerged a tactical commander with years of specialized training finally given purpose. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had studied every possible emergency scenario and knew exactly how to respond. Viper Lead, this is Viper 5, she continued. I need you in Viper 2 to establish a wide perimeter at Angels 12. Viper 3 and 4, drop to low altitude and prepare for ground coordination with emergency services. But Chun Rodriguez began, his confusion evident. We don't understand why you're suddenly in command of this operation. Because Control Tower reviewed my qualifications and found what you never bothered to look for, Sarah replied calmly as she banked toward the smoking civilian aircraft. Advanced Emergency Response Certification, Mountain Rescue Specialization, and the highest scores in tactical flight coordination in the history of this base. The radio went quiet except for engine noise and her own steady breathing. Below, the civilian pilot was attempting a forced landing in extremely difficult terrain. Sarah's aircraft closed the distance with mathematical precision, every control input calculated for maximum efficiency and minimum time loss. Sarah's squadron scrambled to follow her commands as she demonstrated flying skills none of them had ever witnessed. Her F-16 moved through the air like a precision instrument, executing maneuvers that defied their understanding of what was possible in combat aircraft. Civilian aircraft, this is Military Rescue Commander, Sarah transmitted to the distressed pilot. I am positioned to guide you to the safest landing zone in this terrain. Follow my instructions exactly and maintain visual contact with my aircraft. Roger, Military Rescue, the civilian pilot replied, his voice filled with desperate hope. I have you in sight. Sarah began a series of complex aerial maneuvers designed to show the civilian pilot the optimal approach path while simultaneously avoiding mountain peaks and dangerous wind currents. Her aircraft carved through the air with surgical precision, each turn calculated to account for wind speed, terrain features, and the civilian plane's limited capabilities. Rodriguez and the others watched in stunned silence as she executed maneuvers they had only seen in advanced flight demonstration videos. Her situational awareness was absolute, tracking multiple aircraft positions, ground obstacles, weather patterns, and emergency vehicle locations simultaneously. Viper 2, what exactly are we watching here? Thompson whispered over a side channel. We're watching someone who belongs in the Thunderbirds demonstration team. Rodriguez replied quietly, his earlier arrogance completely gone. How did we never see this before? The answer was becoming painfully obvious to everyone listening. The civilian aircraft touched down safely on the emergency landing strip that Sarah had guided them to with flawless precision. Emergency vehicles raced to assist as she coordinated the entire rescue operation from the air with the skill of a seasoned commander. Perfect execution. Viper 5, Control Tower transmitted. Outstanding leadership and flight demonstration. All aircraft returned to base for debrief. As the squadron flew back in formation, Sarah found herself in the lead position for the first time. Behind her, Rodriguez, Thompson, Martinez, and Parker followed her flight path with newfound respect and recognition of abilities they had completely underestimated. After landing, Major Williams met them on the tarmac with the civilian pilot who had survived because of Sarah's expertise. The rescued man shook her hand with tears in his eyes, thanking her for saving his life with flying skills he called miraculous. Chun Rodriguez approached her after the formal debrief, his voice humble and sincere. I owe you an apology. We all do. Your qualifications and training records show advanced certifications none of us even knew existed. Why didn't you ever tell us? Sarah looked at her squadron mates. No longer the mocking voices that had excluded her, but pilots who now understood they had been flying alongside someone exceptional. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about your favorite moment or character, or tell us about someone you know who showed hidden strength when it mattered most. Because, Sarah replied with quiet dignity, respect isn't something you tell people about. It's something you earn when the moment demands it.